I like having these headphones on. I feel like it gets me in that zone. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 1 of the Rich and Facts podcast. We are joined by yours truly, Richard Damas. I am the creator of the Rich and Facts brand. And I'll be hosting this podcast with my friend since high school, Alex Monteverdi.
Hello.
So we got a lot of topics to get into. We're talking about NBA playoffs. We're talking the Patriots and their drama going with what I call the Big Three: Brady, Belichick, and Gronk, as well as other interesting topics going around in both the NFL and the NBA right now. So to start with, we've got a couple topics we're going to run down with.
So we're going to focus mostly on basketball in this segment. So we have a few topics, and the first topic that we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about the Kyrie and Isaiah Thomas trade from last summer. We're going to go through a kind of retrospective on that trade, whether we thought that at the time that the Celtics or the Cavs got the better of that deal, and how we view it now that there's been a season to kind of evaluate the results of that. So starting with that, so my man's here, Richard, he posted an article on his page about why he was concerned about the trade, and he basically thought we had given up too much and that Kyrie might not be good enough, especially given his defense and his apparent inability to lead a team to wins by himself. That Richard was concerned that he's maybe not a franchise cornerstone, the kind of guy that you're going to devote max level money to when you have to extend him. So Richard said that, and I don't think you felt great about the trade, fair to say.
So I didn't feel great about the trade because Isaiah Thomas got a lot of flack for not being a great defensive player, which he's not.
But he's not, and that's the problem. Like, there's nothing to hate on Isaiah Thomas, but this man was exceptional on offense, but that was covering the fact that he was one of, if not the worst defender in the NBA. And some people could say, like, he's 5'9", and somebody may say he's trying. But like in the NBA, in professional sports, trying isn't good enough. Like, you really have to bring the results. And the thing is, like, defense is half of the game. Offense is half the game. So if you only play well on half the game, then how are you going to have the same impact as somebody who's also an offensive superstar, who's arguably as good, if not better, than IT at creating shots for himself. Maybe not quite as good as creating shots for others, but he's a pretty good playmaker for others as well. And the fact that Kyrie stands at 6'3" and IT stands at 5'9". And that means in his own defense, Kyrie Irving can spread his arms farther and wider, and he should be able to cover more of his own ground than IT can. And so when I heard about the trade, I was like everybody else. Everybody in Boston kind of thought that IT was the guy they were going to build around. I really thought during the summer that the Celtics were going to draft Markelle Fultz. They were going to have him be the backcourt partner to IT for the future. They were going to give him the Brinks truck money that he wanted. And, you could argue he earned it, especially in the playoffs when he had all those great performances, when he got hurt, when he had his tooth knocked out, when he got hurt with his hip, and really, like, he put his career on the line for the Celtics, and it's a savage business that, he got the short end of the stick. But if you just look at it in raw terms of whether the Celtics or the Cavs, came out of that trade better, I'd say the Celtics are in a much better position, obviously, because the Cavs have traded Jay Crowder. They've traded Isaiah Thomas. So they've gotten rid of two of the biggest players they got. They also got Ante Zizic, but he hasn't made that kind of an impact yet. And then Cleveland's also getting a draft pick. But if you would have told Cleveland they were going to get a first-round draft pick and they were going to trade away pretty much anybody else that they got for Kyrie, they'd have been like, nah, we're not going to do that. But so in retrospect, Kyrie might have forced the trade, and at the time, it might have seemed better than it was that they were going to get IT, and he was going to play with LeBron James. But, like, I don't think that Isaiah Thomas could have ever fit in that kind of Batman role, or the Robin role, rather, to a Batman like LeBron, because with Kyrie, you really had that, what Kobe describes like the two kings offense, where they would run a lot of sets where it's Kyrie or LeBron's job to create offense for the team, either for themselves or for a teammate. But I think, Kyrie Irving has, shown over the past year that he can really lead a team that's in proper system, that puts him in good position on defense, where he doesn't have to be stellar, but he just has to stretch his arms in a zone defense and cover his ground. And, if you're going to think about who you're going to give max money to, you want to give max money to the 6'3" point guard who can't be stopped with the ball in his hands, who can play average defense? Or are you going to give it to the 5'9" point guard who bled for you, but at the end of the day is potentially an above average scorer if he's that Batman on that team? If you put Avery Bradley, Jay Crowder, Al Horford, even people like Amir Johnson around this dude to complement the fact that you're not going to get that contribution from him on defense. But on offense, a lot of the offense is going to be centered around him, pick and roll actions and that sort of thing. Trying to get this dude open, to get him baskets, get him rolling to the basket too. So I think for Kyrie, because he was in that Robin role with LeBron, he knows how to efficiently use his touches on the floor. So if you think about his usage rate is probably more efficient than somebody like IT, who really needs a team to be built around him. And I think you can just build around Kyrie more easily because he's a better defender. So if you're thinking about who am I going to give max money to, who do I want to back up the Brinks truck for, I think you got to pick Kyrie over IT, and that's why the Celtics, even now that we know that both of their seasons were ended by injury, now that we both know that, hey, Kyrie Irving may have chronic knee problems in the future, all that sort of stuff, I think Kyrie will be able to come back from that, and he'll be basically the same player that he's been. And if he's that for the future, I think he's definitely worth a max contract. In the NBA, you need ball handlers, you need wings, and you need bigs. And he is a ball handler, and other than, Rozier and Smart, Celtics and, Shane Larkin, I guess. The Celtics don't have the greatest stable of ball handlers, but when you have somebody like Kyrie, those problems are mitigated because he can really run the offense, and then at the same time, he doesn't have to bring the ball up every time. He can let Marcus Smart, Terry Rozier, even Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, even Al Horford bring the ball up the floor, and he can set up out on the wing, and they can run screen actions, get him open, get him the ball, get him rolling to the basket on a cut. Like, all these sorts of things are things that I think Kyrie can do more easily, and I would argue he's better under the basket than IT. So I think the Celtics, Danny Ainge is a genius. He made out like a bandit, and people might have disagreed with him at the time, but I think Kyrie has shown himself to be that max player that the Celtics needed. Like, some people have already argued he's the greatest point guard that the Celtics have ever had. You can really make that argument based on what he did this year. He scored a lot of points. He was making plays for others. He fit well into the offense where he didn't have to do too much, kind of in that Russell Westbrook mold where it's like, this man's doing too much. He's trying to score too much. He's trying to create too much offense by himself. He's not trying to fit into an offense. He's trying to mold it to himself. Those people seem like they can insert themselves into a system like Brad Stevens and thrive in that system. Those dudes are the ones you want to give max money to. They have skills and they fit. So I want to give my man Richard's opinion on this now.
Well, my man Alex, gave me a lot of material to digest. So let me try to respond to your points piece by piece, and I'll get into the article as well. So I wrote an article, back in August about why I was concerned about the trade. The reason why I was concerned about the trade was because I had yet been able to see whether Kyrie could be your best player on a winning team. When his first couple seasons in Cleveland, they were terrible. I don't think they won over 40 games once. And we could attest that to the fact that LeBron left, and LeBron.
But he had a terrible team around him.
But my issue is when LeBron was on the team and LeBron didn't play, they were still sub 500.
But that's because it's a team built around LeBron, right?
But at the same time,
it's a team built around LeBron.
That didn't happen as much when Dwayne Wade was playing there. It just seemed like the Cavs were a completely different team when LeBron was off.
But are you going to compare Kyrie, even like a few years ago to Dwayne Wade in his prime when the Celtics and the Heat were really going at it. Like Dwayne Wade was still one of the best players in the NBA, and that was the reason why people were mad at LeBron. They weren't really mad at him because he was playing with Chris Bosh. They were like, "Yo, Dwayne Wade is one of the best players in the NBA. He's one of the greatest shooting guards of all time, and you're just gonna go play with him, like circumventing the fact that you're losing to the Celtics."
Kyrie was an up-and-coming star, like Kyrie.
But he was it was his first 3 years in the league. So you can't be like, yo, based on this man's first 3 years in the league, where if you're a number one pick, it means that you're either on a bad team
or you about year 4, 5, 6 with LeBron, and you're still losing games. I expect you to be.
But it's a team based on LeBron, so that's a bad argument.
But you say it's a team based on LeBron, but LeBron got a
It's
lot
a
of
two Kings offense, so if you don't have one of the Kings on the floor, you have Kyrie trying to run the show by himself. And the difference is when he's not being put in a position to succeed on defense, when he's not being asked to be more efficient on the offensive end because he doesn't have LeBron out there, you really can't expect him to like pick up the production unless the strategy and the playbook change. Like you can't just expect players to elevate their game without any like strategy change. That's not fair.
Well, you have to. How many times have you seen LeBron James do it? A guy goes down and he ends up giving you 40, 13, and end up winning a game against a team that they probably should beat.
But are you telling me that Kyrie's even close to the level of LeBron in terms of like greatness as a player?
I think Kyrie's good enough that I expect you. Even though you can say this team was built around LeBron, I still think because you have spot shooters like the J.R. Smiths and the Kyle Korvers and
So who's your small forward when LeBron comes off the floor? And then think about imagine think about it as an analogy. Like the Patriots go 16-0, Tom Brady's their quarterback. They lose in the Super Bowl. They go 16-0. Next year they come out, they go 11-5 with Matt Castle. The difference between 11-5 and 16-0, you may say that they would have fluctuated around a mean. Like maybe that year they would have won 15 games if they did the same scenario 100 times or whatever. But what I'm saying is the team the next year dropped off by 5 games, and that's the difference between Tom Brady and Matt Castle. So if you're talking about the difference between it's wins above replacement. That's like the ultimate sabermetric stat is like wins over replacement. How much better is LeBron than the dude who comes off the bench to replace him when he's not playing? And I would argue that because the team is so dependent on LeBron, it's so designed for what LeBron does well, that when he's off the court, it's like their key cog isn't in the system and they're basically trying to run on 80%. And you just can't expect them to maintain that same level of production. Right. So, and Kyrie's also a ball handler too. In order to be able to create offense for yourself, it's not enough to be great at creating like shots for yourself. You have to have the threat of being able to pass to people, because if you don't, like, they won't respect the fact that you're not going to take the shot.
And that's what I'm saying. You've had 3 years to sort of develop your game as a facilitator. When LeBron came back, this man was in his 4th year.
But compare the system Brad Stevens instills.
So that's why I'm giving credit to the coaching staff of Brad Stevens, because if we even want to bring this to Isaiah Thomas, I think what we learned about Isaiah Thomas is this guy can be really effective. I don't think what he did was a fluke.
It's not a fluke.
But you designed a great scheme around him where you surrounded Isaiah Thomas with 3-and-D players like Avery Bradley, Jay Crowder. And
also you have people like Al Horford. Like Al Horford is underrated because he doesn't score as many points as you would expect a max player
from a defensive perspective
and a passing perspective and his picks. Like if you look at
those guys can play without the basketball shelf side
exactly.
Because IT needs the ball to be effective. Now the problem with that is you can win games, but you can only go so far with that. Eventually, you'll run into a team in the postseason that's going to figure out, okay, if we trap this guy, these other guys can't make their own shots. Like, you think about when, the first year when they got in the playoffs with IT, when we traded for them at the end, they played Cleveland in the first round. They didn't have a chance against Cleveland.
See, I disagree with you. You watch those games, right? Like, the Celtics lost 4 straight games, but they were never out of those games. They were never out of those games.
It was a competitive 4-game swing.
And it was like, they're an 8 seed playing against the 1 seed, and so they're going to get smashed. But even though they lost in a sweep, that would mislead you to what the Celtics were capable of. They didn't even have Al Horford at the time. They get Al Horford, Now they're in the Eastern Conference Finals.
But it was difficult for them to generate offense.
Yes, no, I agree with you.
Game. But I think a better example of that is the following year when they got I think it was the 5th seed, and they played the Atlanta Hawks. And the Atlanta Hawks, implemented the same strategy. We're going to trap IT, and we're going to dare one of these other guys to beat us. It's tough when you build a team like that, because one player is not going to lead you to a championship in this new NBA, especially when that guy is 5'9"
Tell that to LeBron.
And he can bring it on the defense.
Tell that to Russell Westbrook.
Well,
tell that to.
I think that comes down to the player as much as it does coaching, because we were talking, you talked, Jazz, but just to give the audience a taste, I believe that coaches like Billy Donovan and even Scott Brooks, when he was in OKC, I think as a coach, it is your job to maximize your players' talent. If you have a player like Russell Westbrook or Isaiah Thomas and they're having issues being effective without the basketball, they want to take all the shots, they want to make all the passes. If that's not leading your team deep into the playoffs, you have to be able to sit down and say, hey, you know what? I need you to take less shots from the 3-point line. Listen, I need you to.
It's not even less shots from the 3-point line. I need you to do less.
Exactly, do less. But these guys feel like
it's about trusting your teammates, right? It's like when you trust it's like James Harden. Like the reason why this dude was scoring, he had 14 points in the third quarter before he started making threes, and he would have been like, oh, he's playing a bad game. And now you look at it and you're like, oh, now he's playing a good game. But the reality is this dude just kept taking shots. Like, you don't necessarily want to stop somebody like that from taking shots, but there's a sense in which the reason why James Harden is good is because that team emphasizes passing, looking for that open 3-point shot, always hunting that out so that they're getting high quality, really high productive or high productivity offensive chances. And I think, when you have somebody like IT, what's going on is he has to create so much more offense by himself that he's efficient scoring, but he has to spend so much more energy and effort to get the same thing that James Harden gets, which James Harden gets by either stepping up to the 3-point line and hitting a shot in your face, or by dancing around you and dunking in your face because he's 6'5" and he's big and strong. So I think there's just a ceiling to what somebody like an IT can do in terms of you have to design the team around them. It's going to tend to be a defensive-minded team, but at the same time, because they're defensive-minded, but they have IT playing heavy minutes, you can't trust IT to help you play defense. Therefore, your defense is really only going to be middling, like the Celtics defense started becoming in year 3 with IT. Once it got to that point, IT, Avery Bradley was starting to show up with his defensive metrics at all. Avery Bradley, is he really still a good defender? Oh, Jay Crowder, is he really still a good defender? All these sorts of questions. And it's like, they had to carry him, and everybody went up against Avery Bradley and could attest to him. They were like, yo, this man is a terror on defense. It's so hard to score on him. It's not because he's a bad defender that the Celtics got gashed by the Cavs. It's just like, yo, you cannot win if you don't play good defense. The only game the Celtics won of the Cavs series last year was when Marcus Smart scored 27 points. And it's like, he needs to hit threes like that. They need a guy who can do less and then play defense, play above average defense, really, for Marcus Smart. And you can get that kind of game that you can steal from the Cavaliers, because it's like, yo, at some point, defense and timely shooting will get you a win. And it may be by the slimmest of margins, but a win's a win, no matter how you get it in the playoffs, in my opinion.
Well, I think what Kyrie has showed me this season is that he can move without the basketball and be effective, and he can also be a facilitator and a scorer on a team that can be top 3, top 5 in the NBA. And I will give a lot of credit. I give a credit to that Brad Stevens team as well, because if Kyrie had been traded to Minnesota or New York, I don't think he would have had. I don't think
he might have played well with Porzingis.
He might have played well with Porzingis, but I don't know if the Knicks are winning.
The Celtics are trying to get Porzingis.
I don't know if Kyrie's defensive numbers are are what they were. Because when he was with LeBron, I think it was after the 2016-17 season.
He was never a great defender.
He was never a great defender.
But even Jay Crowder and LeBron James don't play good
Curry's not a great
defense.
defender. Right. Curry's not like Kyrie was the 12th best point guard based on ESPN's plus minus ratio.
Yo, don't worry about that because that's nonsense. Anybody would tell you,
Thomas was 13.
Anybody would tell you watching the Celtics play and looking just like the impact that Kyrie had on the game. It's like when the times get tough in the game, you just give Kyrie the ball and you say, like Kyrie can just spot up at the perimeter, get a screen, and hit a three in somebody's face, and you have confidence that Kyrie's going to make that shot because he shoots good percentage, he's efficient, he can get to the line, he can hit. You know that when he's attacking the basket, this man isn't Derrick Rose going to destroy the rim. He's going to do one of those shots that he practiced a million times in the pregame with his left hand bank from the right side of the paint, and he's going to make that shot because he's taken it 1,000 times, and that's the 1,001st time that he's going to hit it, but then he's hitting it in the game over a 7-footer. Like, that's where I think Kyrie comes in, and I think now you would agree with me, though. The Celtics made out like bandits in that trade.
I mean, it depends on what happens. I mean, Kyrie's got a busted kneecap right now. I need to see how he comes back from that.
What do you mean he has a busted kneecap?
I mean,
he had surgery to remove, like, pins and stuff because they determined that the pins were no longer helping him, were actually could be removed, and then the problem was he had to have a follow-up procedure, I'm pretty sure, because he had some sort of infection or something, and they just had to clear that up. And I think Kyrie's career shows that this dude can suffer a fairly significant knee injury. You talked about him breaking his kneecap in what year was that? In the 2015?
It was 2015
in the
conference finals against the Hawks. But he had he had an injury. I think it was an ankle injury he suffered before that, and then I don't know.
No, he's been injury prone since he was at Duke and played 11 games.
Right.
But he was still the number 1 overall pick because they knew that if they had Kyrie on their team, it didn't matter. Because frankly, in basketball, a dude can play like 55 games a year and have a big impact if they play well in those games. Because these dudes can get hurt and be out for like 2 weeks and then come back and still play well. Because they're at it's not like they disappear into they disappear into the upside down and they're gone until they're back on the treatment. It's just because the fans don't see them on the court.
But those 55 games, give me those 55
or 60,
games.
65, 70 games.
First off, I think depending on how the team's built, I think you got to have, because I don't think the Celtics get the number 2 seed in the East without Kyrie playing all the games.
Yeah, the Celtics got the number 1 seed last year with Al Horford hurt with concussions for a bunch of
you
times.
built a team around a 5'9" point guard who was giving you 29 points a game. It was a completely different system. And I also think that with their season, just to get out Kyrie for a second, I think that Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown had a huge impact on them getting that 2 seed. Because when Gordon Hayward went down, it was going to have to be one of those 2 wing players that was going to have to step up. And, Jason Tatum, there was a lot of love about him, coming to Boston out of the draft, but I don't think he was supposed to be NBA ready, but the way he impacted the this season, I think him and Brown had a huge impact on them going on that 16-game win streak. Kyrie, the best player on the team, no doubt. But you had to have a couple of guys that were.
Well, it always helps to have somebody who's scoring like 14, 15 points a game because that's like a rookie. That's like making 6 or 7 shots a game, taking like 11, 12 shots. So you're not like forcing it by taking too many shots and trying to do too much. And so you can integrate somebody like Tatum. Just seems like we can talk about this because we've got more segments coming up. One thing that I wanted to talk about is Jason Tatum and Paul Pierce comparison. People say Jason Tatum has a game very similar to Paul Pierce, like that confident mid-range game, very polished, like back somebody down and then spin and make a shot on them in mid-range, and also hit threes. We've seen that this year, and also can attack the basket. Now somebody say like he gets stripped a lot when he's coming through the lane, but that'll come in time with just getting in the weight room. But he seems to like have a very good feel for the offensive side of the game, and then he's long, so he plays well on the defensive side. And people forget Paul Pierce wasn't a bad defender. Paul Pierce was like a decent defender, and he was good. He was great on offense, and you knew that Paul Pierce was real clutch, and that he could just rain buckets and go toe to toe with people like LeBron James and come out the victor. So I think the question for Tatum is, and I think he's like answered the bell because it's his first year, and this man's scoring like 15 points a game.
He's passed the test as a rookie. He didn't. I think he had a little slump, you know, that rookie wall, whatever you want to call it, there in the middle of the season, like kind of like in that January, February, March range. It seemed like he was
when the NBA teams start coming up with a scouting report and they realize, oh, we need to run this man off the 3-point line. We can't just be letting this dude shoot all over. Like this dude shooting 50%. He's like leading the league in 3-point percentage. We can't keep letting this happen. So I definitely feel you. He was definitely bound to like regress to the mean.
But I think towards the end of the season, he started to play at the level he was back in December.
When Kyrie went down and they needed like basically he is their I think he's their. It's not that he's their highest volume scorer in the sense that he's always going to be their lead scorer, but he's that, even with Jaylen Brown scoring like 30 points a game, you look at Jason Tatum, you're like, this dude could really just be a horse in the playoffs in the future. Like, this dude could score 25 points a game. He really looks like Paul Pierce, and it's like, if he's as good as Paul Pierce was back in the day, and you can have, like, you can pair him with Jason Tatum, Kyrie, Al Horford, like people talk bad about Al Horford, and honestly, I'm one of those people who thinks that if you're a max player and you don't perform volume scoring, even if you have a positive impact on both sides of the ball, you're not worth the money that they're paying you because you're not making that offensive impact that's really important in sports. Like, it's just objectively true in basketball and really in a lot of sports that offense is more important than defense. Yeah, that's just reality.
I just think that guys get max contracts because, you know,
it's timeliness. It's like he came in when the Celtics wanted to pair him with Kevin Durant, and they were probably going to pair them with Isaiah Thomas, and that was going to be their big three. I bet you Danny Ainge was like, I'm going to get one more draft pick. I'm going to get Kevin Durant. I'm going to get Al Horford, and we're going to have a nasty big three. Because here was always the problem in OKC was Russell Westbrook held the ball too much. Running actions with pick and roll kind of with Horford and IT with KD on the wing, that's so dangerous because even if you double IT, you probably eventually, based on player movement, you're probably leaving Kevin Durant open for open shots. And everybody, you know, a lot of people talk bad about can we swear here? Let's be real.
Come on, man.
A lot of people talk shit about Kevin Durant because he went to the Golden State Warriors. But frankly, like, this man wanted to win. But I guarantee you, if he had come to Boston, nobody would have shit on him. Everybody would have noticed. It would have been the perfect move. Like, it would have been the perfect PR move.
The NBA would have loved that because I think the NBA's success, like, you know, for me watching some of the 30 for 30 on the Celtics Lakers rivalry, and you see how how the NBA sort of covered. The NBA always seems to, they like it when the Celtics and the Lakers are relevant.
And when the 76ers and the Knicks and when the Lakers.
Like those historic teams who happen to also be top 10 markets, top 5.
When the Chicago Bulls are playing well.
It's good for the league. You know, it's history. It's branding.
But nobody would have said you're a traitor because you went to the Celtics.
Well,
but if you go to the team that had you had them down 3-1 and you lost them, it makes you look a little bad.
And let me
but for him, he wanted to win. And I don't hate on him for that.
I want you to give me your take on this too, because I really think that because I wrote an article on that too. The summer he went to Golden State on, you know, what does it mean to be a champion in the NBA? And I was specifically talking about players that we look at as like Hall of Fame-esque. I think Jordan set a standard in the 90s where what it means, it's not just enough to win a championship. You have to be the best player on that championship team. And in a way,
tell that to Kenny Smith.
You can't be right. And your team should be in a situation where like they are counting on you to be the guy. If you kind of just like form a super team and it feels like, okay, they could have won without you, it's not the same because
Brian Scalabrine is a champion forever.
Kevin Durant in Boston would have been the perfect story, assuming you wins the ring, because I'm assuming
because he would be leading the team.
And he's elevating a team that was kind of in the middle of the pack. And if he would have won it, you'd know this guy was the best player in Golden State. They won.
Oh, but did you? When I watched the finals last year, maybe it was a mirage, something that is just like an illusion for the time, and don't want to be a prisoner of the moment. He looked better than LeBron because LeBron was trying to do too much, and that was the problem, right? LeBron always tries to do the most, and the problem is you play on a team with 5 people, including yourself. You've got to utilize 5 people, because 5 people working in unison will always beat a team that's basically divided up into 2 stars and 1 mid-level star and a couple of dudes who are out there to be 3-and-D people. Like, the Warriors play better than the Cavaliers because they are a better team than the Cavaliers, even when Kyrie was there, because they're more well-rounded, they pass the ball better, they move better, they understand that when Klay Thompson gets a shot off, it creates shots for Steph Curry, because now they have to go check Klay Thompson. They can't check Steph Curry. But then you can't check everybody, so you have to pick your poison. Like, you remember, like, in the first finals run, Draymond Green was scoring like 20 points in some games. Like, this man was shooting threes, doing all. Do you see this dude doing this now? Not, you don't. Like, you see him passing the ball, and he's certainly an all-star.
He's still effective.
And he's very effective, but this dude doesn't even have to score. And people still recognize how good he is.
And I think that's a testament to their system. But this is where I really want to give coaches credit, like Steve Kerr, because Steve Kerr implemented a philosophy where
he knew player movement was going to be the big factor.
Exactly. He took the game to another level where he said, "Listen, you guys were an iso ball team of Mark Jackson. It was you, it was Klay, and it was Steph chucking up threes. We're not going to do that. We want you guys running. We want to change the pace. Let's get Draymond Green starting lineup."
But it's really about also like running back screens. Like the fact that you can have somebody like Steph Curry and have him close to Klay Thompson on the baseline, for instance, and then you get Klay Thompson or Steph Curry to set a pick on the other one's man so that the other one can go get a shot. Now you have to be careful because each one of them is dangerous down low as well as at 3-point line. So you can't leave them alone. So one of the greatest shooters of all time is setting a back screen so that another one can pop out from the back of the zone defense of the Cavaliers and rain in threes from the corner or just get free out on the perimeter.
He's quick too. I think
he's mad quick. He's athletic.
He's sneaky quick. Where like you look at Steph and you're like. Steph gets a lot of flack because people look at Steph as a finesse guy that likes to stay the perimeter, but he gets to the rim.
No, this man does yoga for a reason. He has core strength, and he knows that his ankles are shite. He knows that his ankles are bad. Like even Steph Curry, for example, you're talking about like Kyrie and his injuries. Steph Curry is always a risk to sprain his ankle. You always know. You always know that. And here's the thing: if he sprains his ankle and he tries to play on it, that makes it more likely that he's going to sprain his knee. It's just one of those things where like certain players just have like chronic injuries, and it doesn't really matter because if they're there, they're going to play well. And that's where I see Steph Curry. He's like, this man has devoted himself to his core strength. Like he knows that in order to have relatively healthy ankles, he really has to take care of the rest of his body.
Training regimen. I was reading an article about that.
But he even does like yoga and shit like that.
Yeah, it helps. I mean, he's still getting hurt, but at least it's not as bad as like, in his first couple years in the league where he was missing 60, 50-something games a season because of the,
because of his ankles.
Exactly, his lower body issues.
But he's gotten better in that regard. You'd agree with that, right?
But you're talking about the if in terms of when he's there. Now, the problem was in 2016 when he went 73-9, when Steph came back, he wasn't the same player.
Mm-hmm.
And the team itself was not able to account for that. I mean, they got down 3-1 against OKC.
But they played well, and they could have won that finals.
And they should have won that.
Draymond Green hadn't kicked him in the nuts, that it wouldn't happen.
But in Draymond Green, I say that is karma because Draymond Green kicked even Adam in the nuts. I don't know if it was game 3, game 4, they didn't suspend him, and I know, you know why?
But I'm talking about in the final. Like, what did he do in the finals that got him suspended? Because remember, they were up 3-1, and then the Cavs came back.
He gave LeBron little shots.
Because I think he did something else that got him kicked out of the game, and got him suspended. And it's like this dude. You can't really even blame him because they had plenty. It's like blaming Bill Buckner for the Red Sox losing World Series.
You're playing for a championship. You gotta keep emotions in control. And this is my thing, right? Like, I understand in the heat of the moment,
but his passion is the reason why he plays well. So you can't tell athletes you gotta turn it off.
It's a very
you just gotta ride the wave and hope it doesn't crash on you.
And it's tough because sometimes, where's the line? When does that weight become too much? In this case, it was too much because it allowed Cleveland to get back in the series. Cleveland won, so in games 5, 6, and 7, I think it's pretty fair to say LeBron James and Kyrie Irving were the two best players for those last 3 games.
But that's fair. But that just shows you that what Golden State's system is based on. It's based on player movement. It's based on the idea that we have lots of right. And if your centerpiece of your offense, if the greatest shooter of all time has his mobility limited, then obviously that's going to make the system less efficient. And so you have a system in Cleveland where they could theoretically challenge the Warriors. It was never a question that when the Cavaliers in the first 2 times they met with the Warriors in the finals, that they had a legitimate chance to beat the Warriors.
Absolutely.
Like if you had a team like Toronto, for example, this year to go up against the Warriors, assuming that Steph is healthy for the finals, you would say it's a joke. That the Warriors are about to smash the Raptors. Even if our Celtics went to the finals this year, let's just imagine, they would get smashed. But you think about the Cavaliers and you're like, wow, with Kyrie and LeBron, you do have the two Kings offense, and in theory and usually in practice, it's less efficient than the Warriors offense. But then in certain instances, you can use that style of play to win. And it may be dependent on, the turn of the game, like the bounces that you get, or it may be determined upon Steph Curry being less mobile and being less effective. But in either case, it makes it possible for you to win. But there's a reason why they only won 1 of those 3 finals. And I think if they went to the finals this year, they'd make it 1 of 4.
So to that series, when it went 7 with the Draymond Green situation, I do.
Like those other series didn't even go to 7 games.
I do think that they played better defensively, and like I said, some of that was due to Steph, probably wearing down more with the injury as the series, went on. But I thought the Cavs stepped up defensively. I mean, Kevin Love kind of got phased out, but I think that when they won
talking to me about Kevin Love, the man's wasted. That man wasted so many. This man won 1 championship with Cleveland, and that's something that you can never take away from him. But he wasted his potential, because if you remember when he was with the Timberwolves, he was a star. Yeah, he was scoring like 25 points, 15 rebounds a game. They were doing Sports Illustrated articles about how this motherfucker gets offensive rebounds better than anybody else. And then you're going to tell me that he's going to be the 3rd option on your team? Why do you even have him? Like, why do you trade Andrew Wiggins away? Right? Because you trade him because he's not ready for LeBron, right? That's always been LeBron's thing. Get rid of the people who aren't ready now. Get me veterans. It's like, what if you had Andrew Wiggins and you had created a super athletic team and put big men who were just meant to block shots, play defense, get rebounds on both ends of the floor, run pick and roll action, make shots right at the basket. Like, why do you need a power forward who's 6'8", can't defend power forwards, who can't really rebound as consistently as he can if he's the number 1 option on that team? If he's being expected to stand out on the perimeter, to clear out room for LeBron James. Get a power forward or a center that can run a fucking screen for him. Don't waste this motherfucker's time picking and popping, because it's not effective. This dude LeBron really wasted Chris Bosh and Kevin Love's career. And it's like, if you had just had Dwayne Wade and LeBron and other people, or you had just had Kyrie and LeBron and other people, I think they would have been more efficient, because they would have been forced to realize that you do not need a power forward as good as Kevin Love to get that kind of production that you need from the power forward, one of those big spots, right? There's really only 3 positions in basketball: ball handler, wing, and big. And you need bigs, because at the end of the day, size is the difference between having intimidating interior defense and not having it. And intimidating interior defense means the Golden State Warriors can't just go in the paint against the Celtics because Al Horford is down there, because they have, even earlier in the year, Aaron Baines, Tice, like the Celtics had a good defense where I thought if they were healthy, especially if they had Gordon Hayward, I would have been like, yo, the Celtics are going to make a series against these dudes because they're well-rounded and they're a good team.
And they're a great three-point shooting team too. They have depth, so that's the type of.
But the thing is, they don't have one player taking up all the oxygen. And the thing is, LeBron James really can't be compared to anybody really in his era. He can only really be compared to like LeBron, Kareem, those dudes. And it's like based on that standard, the reason why LeBron's not as great as them is because he's not as good of a scorer, and scoring is the most important thing in the NBA. And because he tries to do everything else really, and he does everything really well. He's a great passer, he's a good rebounder, he's a great defender. But because he tries to do too much, it's almost like his usage rate. He has to expend more energy than anybody else. So Kyrie can leave his team, become even more efficient, even do less, get less touches and still score similar points per game because he's being used effectively. It's when you have that two Kings offense, it's really dependent on those playmakers to always be creatively making plays, and that's difficult. Whereas if you run sets based on player movement, it's not about freelancing it and kind of intuiting what's going on. It's like, yo, we've practiced this. When this man gets to this part of his curl on the perimeter, I'm supposed to pass to him because this man has set a pick for him and now he's open. Or, we're at a point in the action where, it makes sense to do this based on all these scenarios we've run in practice. We know where the ball should go.
Well, LeBron doesn't practice anymore, so wherever he goes.
But that's his problem. It's like, yo, LeBron, if you want your team to really play like that, you either have to go to San Antonio and play for Greg Popovich, or if LeBron wants to be the GM and the coach, he's got to be the GM and the coach. And now we're watching LeBron right now hit this game-winning three. And I'm not telling you that LeBron isn't the greatest player on the planet, but he sucks all the oxygen out of the room. And what you're left with is you're left with Chris Bosh and you're left with Kevin Love getting third helpings when they should be stars.
He sucks the oxygen. But
he tries to do too much. Like Steph Curry knows that if he scores more than LeBron, it doesn't matter that he didn't get a triple-double. LeBron can get a triple-double, and it doesn't fucking matter because Steph Curry made 5 more three-pointers than him, and therefore can score way faster.
You still get the smell of apple pie every now and then because he did lead you to 2 championships in Miami and 1 in Cleveland. You can win with LeBron. I think.
Also, LeBron and Wade is a different thing than LeBron and Kyrie. The only reason why is because LeBron and Wade was more of a high-flying offense. You remember, all the alley-oop actions they were when Wade threw that pass forward to LeBron James, and they said his middle name is Dan Marino. I was like, yo, these dudes may be unstoppable this year because it's just the perfect storm of them being real athletic, having good players, like a well-rounded roster and whatnot. But even those teams, it's like, what's going on with Mario Chalmers? Why do you even have a point guard out there if LeBron really wants to be the point guard? But there's no reason to have a small person if your point guard can be 6'8". And you can run another small forward out there to play defense. LeBron. So would you say that LeBron James can defend positions 1 through 5? Not saying that he would defend true centers, but you can switch him, and for a play he can defend all 5 positions.
I think he's shown throughout his career that he can defend all 5
positions. Now, can he defend point guards for a full game?
I mean,
could he stand in front of Steph Curry and defend him?
Steph Curry,
no, right?
The greatest shooter of all.
But he can't defend him.
You don't see superstars guarding each other for.
You see Russell Westbrook doing that though.
And look right now, he had 4 fouls in the first half
against Ricky Rubio. But I'm saying when somebody like Rajon Rondo, for example, when one of these more physical guards plays defense, they can dominate the other player because when you have somebody like that, they can basically get those shooters out of their rhythm. Because those shooters need to be they need to be running their sets effectively, taking good percentage shots because the shots are more difficult. They're from farther away. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, I think it's a little easier on Rondo too because Rondo's not someone who's looking to score. Rondo's looking to pass and get others involved, so he's not spending as much energy trying to get offense in. I mean, you're not really seeing LeBron. Like I mean, in Miami, when I'm talking about LeBron guarding five positions, I remember watching plays where this guy was just.
But I'm saying, can he? Because you could say he can defend us.
Not for an entire game.
But why? But then so he's not a point guard. But he wants to play point guard, right? So why don't you have? So then why don't you trot out?
LeBron wants to do a little bit of everything. Let me get into your take about his game. I think with LeBron, especially when he went to Miami, he's always felt like, listen, we can win my way. The reason why he felt comfortable in Miami was because Pat Riley was in control of what was going on with the Heat. LeBron wanted Eric Spoelstra gone. LeBron wanted this guy. LeBron wanted that guy. Pat Riley said, listen, you shut up, you play, I'm going to build the team. But LeBron felt like he had the knowledge, the formula for having. I really think that in 2000, you're talking about the Spurs. I really think that in 2014 when they got blown out the court, they got beat 5. I think
LeBron's lucky that they didn't lose to. LeBron is lucky that they didn't lose the year before because they could have very easily lost, and everybody would have said he only won one championship.
But in Game 7,
he got rescued by Ray Allen. He missed. But here's the thing: if you tell me right now that at the end of the game, that was Game 7.
It was
Game 6.
And they had this
the Warriors are down 3-2 in the series. They're down by 3 points. And you tell me that Steph Curry is going to get a wide open 3-pointer from the left angle, not the left corner, but from the left. What is that position? It's not at the top of the key, but it's the left wing of the 3-point line. If you're going to tell me Steph Curry is going to get a shot from there from 3-point range with nobody in his face, and he's going to miss that, I tell you no. I tell you he's going to make that shot more times than he misses.
But LeBron was the one who gave you the opportunity to be able to make that game.
But then Ray Allen makes the shot, right?
See, and this is the problem. This is what you're saying about LeBron's game is the fact that
he doesn't shoot the three. He plays a style of game was built for a previous era. Like he was built for an era that didn't value 3-point shots as much because they hadn't discovered that a 3-point yield in a shot is just more efficient than a 2-point yield if you can hit it at a high enough percentage. LeBron may shoot 40% from 3, but at the end of the day, and when a playoff series comes up, I bet you their scouting report is, if you have to pick your poison, let him shoot.
And he made those shots in Game 7. Game 7 was Game 7. Pop pretty much they all backed off. They said, we're not letting you go to the rim. You got to shoot, and he made those shots. And also with the Cavs,
I'm not saying he can't make the shots. I'm saying
if you want to take
it's
something
not
away,
as efficient as the Warriors taking those shots.
Not. But at the same time,
it's not even as efficient as the Boston Celtics from 2008 taking those shots.
I think that with the Warriors, but I think the Spurs started the year before Steve Kerr got there. I think
even those Spurs teams too. Like you saw when
2014,
they won 4-1.
It was like boom, boom, boom. It was
the Miami Heat. They were destroying them with team basketball because it was amazing to watch because you watch and they were like,
it really started during Game 3 though, because the first 2 games were low scoring and they were competitive, right? Like even in Game 1, Miami had a chance to take Game 1, and then LeBron.
But you don't think the Spurs are doing anything differently, right? Like the Spurs come at it with the same idea that it's about us passing the ball, it's about us playing good defense, and it's about us staying within ourselves. Like the Spurs were like up and down, whether or not the Shaq and Kobe Lakers exist, whether or not Dirk is out there, whether or not Kobe's doing his thing, the Spurs are always a threat to win a championship.
I think, but they became a better offensive team in the early Kawhi Duncan years. When they got, especially like I said, 2014.
But it's all predicated on Duncan, though, right? Because Duncan is the ultimate superstar who wants to make plays for himself while making plays for other people too. Like the classic thing from like Steve Kerr's time with the Spurs is that game where he made a bunch of 3-pointers and there's just a shot of Tim Duncan in the post and he's just backed up against a guy, just holding him off, and he just throws a left-handed pass out to Steve Kerr who knocks in a 3. Like that's why Tim Duncan. You could even argue Tim Duncan has had he may not be as in terms of all-time ranking greater player than LeBron, but he may have had a better career because he's a better winner than LeBron. Because for what he does for his team in terms of rebounding, defense, scoring, making sure that he's setting the tone, I think he creates a better winning culture.
Tim Duncan. What was it? I don't know if it was Forest Hill, but Tim Duncan was in college for 4 years.
Yeah, he was at Wake Forest.
Wake Forest. He played for a great coach in a great system. I always feel like when we talk about winning players, that always it's rare that a player by their own talent ends up becoming one of the winningest players of all time. There's always a great system, a great organization behind it. Tom Brady with the Patriots having arguably the greatest coach of all time, Bill Belichick. Kobe Bryant, Kobe won a couple of championships early on with Shaquille O'Neal and Phil Jackson. And they struggled for a little bit after Shaq and Jackson left, but Phil Jackson comes back. They're able to put some pieces around Kobe and another two. There's always more than just a player. I feel like with LeBron, he's almost a victim of his own greatness because he's been able to do so much
that he does too much.
He feels like he doesn't necessarily need that coach. He just feels like give him a couple of players and I can do it because LeBron is the system.
But the system will always break down against a team that's better coached and against a team that's more well-rounded, right? Because isolation ball is hero ball.
Right? And at the same time, I think isolation ball is slowly dying. Right? I feel like Steve, because the difference between what Steve Kerr did with the Warriors when he got there and what Greg Popovich.
So you're saying isolation ball is dying. Look at the Rockets. Look how much isolation ball.
That's why they're not going to beat the goal. Well,
but they work it in within a system because they realize we don't want the regular dudes doing isolation ball. We want Chris Paul and James Harden doing isolation ball because they can create offense for themselves. But other guys, they need somebody to help them create offense, or they can create it, but not as consistently. But you have somebody like Chris Paul, you have really somebody like James Harden. James Harden's standing at the three-point line, and he's a threat to knock in a three if you don't have a hand in his face all the time. And that's what makes James Harden great, is the fact that if he has the right stable of shooters around him, I think that his teams have a higher ceiling than LeBron's teams do, because if he passes the ball well, if they shoot the ball well, if they defend, if they do the things that they're capable of doing, they can score so many more points. But you also saw, like in the Celtics game against the Rockets, the second game the Celtics lost, you saw how good the Rockets defense was. Like the Rockets defense is no joke. And so it's not just because they're doing Mike D'Antoni 7 seconds or less type offense. It's really because they're playing good fundamental basketball, and they've discovered that if you have two dudes who are they want the ball in their hands, they want to control what's going on, they can create offense for themselves and for others, that putting the ball in their hands is better than putting it in anybody else's, especially if it's within a system where you're moving it around. You're not it's not like the OKC with Russell Westbrook and KD, where it just evolves into isolation ball and take turns. And that's the problem with Kyrie and Kyrie and LeBron, rather, is that if you have a two kings offense, basically what you're doing is you're saying we're going to take turns. One play LeBron is going to create offense, and then the next play, or he's going to create offense for a set of plays, let's say 3 or 4, and then Kyrie brings up 2 or 3. That means they're taking turns. And because they're taking turns, they may even be creating offense for each other, but they're not operating, you know that expression, right? Operating on all cylinders. They're not operating on all cylinders. The Warriors are operating on all cylinders. Even the Rockets are operating on all cylinders. That's why I thought the Celtics had a great team this year, because especially if they had Gordon Hayward and Kyrie, they could operate on all cylinders because they had a lot of good players. Not just like they're great players. They had players like Terry Rozier, Marcus Smart,
Daniel Tice, Aaron Baines, Marcus Morris, really. Like, Marcus Morris has been a revelation. Even people like Shemi Olajay coming off the bench, and he hasn't played great on offense, but he's playing good defense.
He played good defense against Giannis.
Exactly, and you've got people like that. And the real thing is, you even have people like Shane Larkin. Like, you have a team within a team such that two of your all-stars are out, and you still have Al Horford and a cast of dudes like Terry Rozier. And you may disagree with me. I think he'll be a starting level point guard in the future. Richard
Terry
agree with me about Terry Rozier.
Terry. Let me look at some of Scary Terry's stats.
I was going to say because Terry Rozier didn't play well in a couple games in Milwaukee, that it overshadows the fact that he had a great season. This man's he's in his third year, right? He's not Marcus Smart where he's going to be a restricted free agent this summer, right?
Yeah,
so he still has time to develop before his contract is up, and you have to make an actual assessment as to his value.
Terry Rozier is going to get a shot because the point guard position is so valuable.
He's going to get a shot like Reggie.
And if you can hit a three, if you can play defense as a point guard, you are going to be valued, and you're going to get an opportunity. So I mean, when I'm looking at Scary Terry's stats, I mean. Games 1 and 2, the guys averaged 23 points a game. He had a huge impact on game 1. Let's just game like it just felt like when Terry was playing games 1 and 2, like man, we don't even not to diss Kyrie, but we don't need to worry about the point guard position in the series. But then when Terry went on the road, I think game 3 he was 3 for 12 from the field. And then
I'd prefer him to be taking shots and missing shots than to be skittish and not taking shots at all and getting shut down in that regard.
Yeah, man, I'm terrible hand. Terry was quiet. Terry did not have a good shooting performance.
But he's a third-year guard, and he's right now he's a legit.
I'm not saying that he's a starter right now. I'm saying that when it's time to pay his rookie max, Celtics are going to have to make a decision, kind of like the.
Wait, I'm looking at it now. Okay, he came back and won the game. Russell Westbrook. Russell Westbrook.
Time out. Look at this game by Russell Westbrook right here. Wow. 45 points, 15 rebounds, and 7 assists. Now, they're going to win the series. Let's think about this for a second. Did he have a triple-double? No. Did it matter that he didn't have a triple-double? No. Because he got 7 assists. And here's the thing. If Russell Westbrook could figure out how to do more by doing less, I think he'd become a better player. If he figured out that he doesn't, it's a matter of trust. It's really a matter of do you trust your teammates or don't you? And if you don't trust your teammates, that means you want to do it if you're good enough. And Russell Westbrook should be good enough. But in the modern NBA where you have to shoot threes, that's not Russell Westbrook's game. So he can get you 45, 10, and 7. He's a great player. He's one of the best players in the NBA. No question about it. You can build around him. You have to be smart about it. Like there are ways to do it, but you also just don't need to put people like Carmelo Anthony around him. It's like Carmelo's a scorer, and Russell Westbrook thrives on volume shooting. Like Victor Oladipo is playing for the Pacers right now. Unleashed by the fact that he does not play with Russell Westbrook anymore. Like this man just takes up too much oxygen in a room. It's a problem of people who are great.
Credit though, because he got in the gym, he got his body right. Like I think this dude lost. Like I remember a picture of him from May after he got eliminated. Like this dude completely changed his diet. Like he was in. You don't improve that much just by leaving Russell Westbrook. I mean,
it's a part of it.
It is a part of it
because was Paul George doing the same things that Oladipo has done this year for the Pacers, and I'm talking about the last few years. I'm not talking about like 2013 when they were pushing the Heat in the playoffs. But I'm saying in recent Pacers history, was he really making that difference? That's why the Pacers traded him, because they were like, we would have to sign this man to the max. We know that he won't sign with us, but on the other hand, too, we don't necessarily want to build around this dude. We've had him for a lot of his prime, but we're willing to let him go because we want to rebuild, and we can even get something for him. We can get Victor Oladipo for him, who's a cast-off because he's being just neglected by playing on a team.
They did not think that Victor Oladipo was going to turn.
No, they did. That's why everybody shit on them making that trade. But there's a reason why he was drafted number 2 in the draft. Like that wasn't necessarily a great draft, but Victor Oladipo, when he was playing at Indiana, showed that he was a good player and that he could. He had potential. Like there's a reason why
the guy was giving you 17 points a game, so at the very least.
But on a Russell Westbrook, like how many points a game did?
No, I think that's good. I mean, if you're a 2 and you can give me 17 points a game, heck, you can be my
and you can play good defense.
If
you're doing it efficiently too, not if you're shooting like 10 of 23 from the floor and you scored 20 points and it's like, dude, did you get to the line? Did you make the 3-pointers?
I think we still have to figure out what kind of 17-point scorer he was, and I think he showed that he can.
But we can kind of put that to the side and say, so. All right, let's get to the Celtics for a second though. So we're talking about Terry Rozier, Marcus Smart, Jason Tatum, and Jaylen Brown. I think those are the 4 players that you have to look at in terms of the Celtics, in terms of what does their future look like, what decisions are they going to make in terms of who to pay, who not to pay, who to let go, who to retain. I think Marcus Smart, I believe, is coming up on his rookie extension. He's going to be a restricted free agent, so the Celtics will get dibs on him, but they can't necessarily keep him if a team makes an offer that they're not willing to match. And the same thing will be the case with Terry Rozier after next year. Now, my first question is, if you're in a situation where, due to financial constraints, you can only afford to extend one of them, which one of those 2 do you extend? And then, given the fact that you know that so Tatum's a rookie and Brown is in his 2nd year, which means Brown, after his 4-year contract is done, will be that sort of restricted free agent that will be eligible for the rookie supermax or the rookie max extension, right? And so will Jason Tatum, and that will be for Tatum after he's done with his 4 years. So down the line, you're going to potentially have to make a decision of if you're paying Kyrie max money, if you're potentially still paying Al Horford max money, which I don't think you could really do that. If you're paying Gordon Hayward max money, and if you've already paid Terry Rozier or Marcus Smart, how do you pay for Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown? Do you have to let one of them go? Do you have to trade one of them in a package to get somebody like, just to throw a name out there, Anthony Davis? Like you include players because you're like, we're not going to be able to retain all of these players after their rookie contracts are done. So we're going to get the most value from them that we can by getting somebody that we can control at a max salary that we're comfortable playing at the max. So do you think that Marcus Smart or Terry Rozier would be that better short-term signing where re-signing them is the kind of thing where they can't really go after a big-time free agent anymore? Celtics are basically done with that at this point. They're either going to make themselves better through trades or through the draft. And I think there's only so much drafting you can do before you have a Warriors problem of how do you max all of these players who are theoretically more worthy of a max. Like, what do you do with Klay Thompson when his contract's done and you know that this motherfucker can score 63 points in 3 quarters? He's an animal, but do you really have confidence that he's a number 1 option worthy of a max contract? Now that's a question. I think some team will tell him yes, but I think there's still a question of, will the Warriors say that? Will the Warriors pay him knowing they have to pay him, they have to pay Steph, and they have to pay KD? Right now they're only paying Steph, and they're paying KD a kind of a discount. Is KD going to want that real max money, that super max money? I don't know if he's not even eligible for that Steph Curry money. He could definitely get a pay raise, and then you've got Draymond Green to think about as well, and you've got a cast of characters on the bench that you have to pay. Like, how do you pay for all that? That's the question, and you can't just. And there's so many people who try to write an article. The Warriors are going to pay $200 trillion in luxury tax by by 2045 or whatever. The motherfuckers don't know what they're talking about.
Billion-dollar owners.
It's like, first of all, those dudes could pay, but on the other hand, it's like, they won't pay that. They know that. They know that they'll eventually cut. They'll cut the salaries to. They'll trade people. They'll make things move around so they can reposition themselves, and they'll basically have to make a decision. They'll be like, because based on how the contracts work in the NBA, it seems like a max contract is 30% of your salary, given the year that you give it out. So Al Horford's max contract is like $28 million, and then Gordon Hayward's is slightly more because he signed it a year later. And so in that sense, you might have somebody who's 30% of the salary his first year, and then by at the end of his contract, he's more like 20% of the salary, and that's maybe how it's designed. But if you're paying somebody 30% of your salary, 20% of your salary, think about somebody like Kyrie. Like, how do you pay Kyrie, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Al Horford, and Gordon Hayward, 5 dudes who could theoretically be worthy of a max contract? Now, you may say that Al Horford won't be worth that, and you could eliminate it down to 4, but even then, you've got 4 dudes who are theoretically worth 30% of your salary. How do you pay 4 guys 30%? That only gets you 120%. Now, somebody may say you can work the numbers. If you sign them in different years, you'll just have to shell out a lot of money. But that's not really the case, because the salary cap will prevent. It'll either mean that they have to cut their bench and just have minimum level players like LeBron gets, or which is going to make the team worse, or they're going to have to do something else.
Right, because at some point,
or they're going to have to make a trade and have somebody like Anthony Davis, who you would pay a max to, and you would get rid of potentially two dudes, or a dude like Tatum, or
you brought up Anthony Davis' name, so start with your first point about Terry Rozier versus Marcus Smart. You're talking about if you keep those 2 guys, they're coming off the bench. You're paying them to be role players. We're not paying them to be stars. I feel like
the one question about Marcus Smart though is, does he have a Kyle Lowry type surge to his career where he? Because I always think Marcus Smart, when I look at him on the court, I'm like, he would be the perfect shooting guard to put right next to Kyrie, because he's hard-nosed on defense. He really can create offense. Like, he's not a great pure point guard, but he can run pick and roll actions with Al Horford, get him going to the rim. He will cast up every shot thinking he can make it, and he will make some very key shots. So I think he would be an ideal player if you could know that he's going to have that Kyle Lowry type surge. But if he has that Kyle Lowry type surge, how do you pay him and Kyrie and Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown and Gordon Hayward? And
I think that whenever you're building a team, you always have to think about what are you building this team for, right? You're building them to win a championship. What's in your way of winning the championship? When they were trying to put these pieces together last offseason, their mindset was, all right, we got to try to beat LeBron. And then if we can beat LeBron, how do we beat the Warriors? I don't think the Celtics realized how bad Cleveland was going to be this year. I think they thought that when they gave Isaiah Thomas away,
that he was going to fill a role.
Right.
They were going to make them worse on defense, but they were still going to win these.
Right, exactly. It was going to be a big three, even though it might not
the Warriors get swept and all that
sort of stuff. But you still think they're probably going to be better than you until
to be honest, when I knew the
Celtics. Let me give you the whole thing, because I felt like they probably thought that with Isaiah. They might lose a little bit on defense, but the Cavs were never a great defensive team in any of those. I mean, some year they won a title. I think they were top 10. That one year they won the championship, but they overall they were never a great defensive team. So I think they feel like
they were always built to be good out defense. Like, that's why they had dudes like Amon Shumpert. That's why they brought in people like Crowder. They
wanted to do their role players just like 3D guys, with just guys that just put bodies out. Well, the superstars,
it's like, why didn't that work?
I mean, well, we already got the whole LeBron thing, but my thing with that is I still think that deep down, Danny Ainge felt like even with Hayward healthy, he probably still needed one more piece to really dethrone LeBron James led big three. Now I think in the end with Isaiah Thomas, because that didn't work out, they had to trade him.
and then bringing a bunch of role players, and we're seeing how these role players have not had the same like. You know, they can't. You traded a ripped up dollar for 75 cents, and in the end, you still really don't have that much money. So it's just further broken up, and no one really wants to change. These role players, they can't get their own shot. And
you tell me Terry Rozier can't create a shot for himself.
No, I'm talking about the Cavs role players. So much of this is coming down to LeBron's ability to make plays and get the balls. He has to. Now he really has to do everything, and you
have Kyle Korver out there, right? He's like one of the greatest shooters of all time. Legitimately, like you have dudes who should be able to make those shots, and the question is,
he made it before against Indiana.
I'm saying why doesn't it happen more consistently? Like what is the key to having a team that's great at 3-and-D?
I like to know how many points he's averaging right now as opposed to when he was in Atlanta. I like to know that.
I think there's a question. Is it just a matter of that kind of player movement that Golden State has? That if you're really playing as a team, and the idea is that even when Steph Curry is on the court with somebody like JaVale McGee or whatever, that JaVale McGee, he's obviously not going to shoot 3-pointers, but they will use him in the offense if he's open. Like the ball in Golden State doesn't go to the best player; it goes to the best shot. And the difference is in
they have to have 4 guys who can make that shot more times than not. But answering that question, this is why I think that Golden State's still going to win a championship if Steph Curry comes back 100%, because they have the best system, but at the same time they have the best players as well. These guys all play within that system, and still. I still think, you can say Clay's been compromised a little bit, but Clay's going to give me 20.
Oh, he's a monster. He's a monster.
That's why Houston's not going to beat him, because it's not just the fact.
But I say it's possible. I'm not saying it will happen. I'm saying
it's 2 all-stars against 4, and these 4 all-stars are playing within a system.
I definitely give Golden State the advantage, but I say it's possible.
Okay, so what does that'll be our hard take, because I'll get into that. But for the Celtics, I think that it's tough now because I don't think you have to worry. I don't think Cleveland. I really think the way the Celtics are built now, the Cavs are built, I think they would be this Cleveland team that got the 4 seed. I think the Celtics took them out, man. Like the way the Cavs ended up, I think the Celtics took them out. With Gordon Hayward healthy, I think they would have took Cavs out. Even if Kyrie was there, I think with home court,
I think the Celtics have Kyrie right now, they'd be the favorite in the East. I think so, because if you watch the Celtics with Kyrie earlier this year, even without Gordon Hayward, they beat the Warriors, they beat the Rockets, and they almost beat the Rockets and the Warriors.
We played really well against Philly too. We defended Joel Embiid pretty well. Because I trust our team on home floor. I think they're both young teams, but I feel like you have more guys on our roster who have real experience, and I think that would have showed up against Philadelphia, especially having a series go through Boston. I really think that we would have beaten Philly with Kyrie. My thing with the Celtics though is now what are you building? Who are you building to try to beat? Who's in front of you right now that you think that you can't beat? And what do you have to beat them? I think the LeBron Cleveland show is done. I think you surpassed that. So who are you looking at right now? Do you think you could beat the Raptors right now? I think so.
Yes.
Philly, I think so. So we're looking at the West now.
Golden State. Because here's the difference.
How do you imagine the Golden State?
The reason why the Celtics could beat the 76ers is because the 76ers' second best player cannot shoot.
Exactly.
And that's a problem, because no matter how great he is, if you can't shoot the basketball in the modern NBA, you're a dinosaur. I'm not trying to judge anybody, but you have to be.
Even if he's a small forward /
even if you have.
Because I think
Ben Simmons, he's a great player, and I think in his own right, he's going to be able to carve a niche out in the NBA marketplace, especially in Philadelphia, playing that kind of Penny and Shaq kind of style of play, where he doesn't have to do all that stuff, because he's a great passer. And really what he does is he does what LeBron does, but he doesn't even try to shoot, right? That's the difference. He's not going to take all the oxygen out of that room, but he's going to pass the ball even more. Right? He's going to defer even more. He's going to trust his teammates even more. So he's going to be able to run pick and rolls with Joel Embiid. He's going to be able to play with Joel Embiid and create. They could have a dynasty there, but then they could also run into the Celtics. And because the Celtics have Gordon Hayward, Kyrie, Tatum, and Brown, I'd honestly go with those four. I'd be like build a team around them. Everybody else is expendable. And if you want to make that decision, I think that's where it comes in, where you have to say, we're going to give these dudes their rookie max, and what's going to happen is that we're going to have to shed people like Terry Rozier and Marcus Smart. And what you're basically betting on is saying that by year 5 and 6, Tatum and Brown are going to be those 20-point-a-game stars. Because that's what you're paying them to be, and they have the potential like that where they can be stars, or potential even for Tatum potentially a superstar. Like you look at Jaylen Brown, and you're like he could be Kawhi Leonard like kind of, right? Like and Jason Tatum, he could be like Paul Pierce-esque. If they have that, and they have that along Kyrie and Gordon Hayward, I think that you put regular big men around them, and you put you find some way to have ball handling off the bench. That's really you can draft that.
Well,
You can draft that, and you can get that back in the draft by finding ways to get assets.
One of those guys is not going to be able to cover power forwards because what the Warriors are showing us is that Draymond Green is a size.
But if you have 4 dudes on the court, and the shortest of them is 6'3", and the other one, so you have a 6'3" guy at quote unquote point guard, and you have a 6'7" dude at quote unquote shooting guard, and you have a 6'8", 6'9" dude at small forward, and you have a 6'8" dude at power forward. Those dudes are pretty big. Overall, and in terms of zone defense, when those dudes spread their arms, they're big, and that means they can play good defense. That's what it comes down to. It's about size, it's about physicality, and I think that they really can just run teams off the court with their offensive skill, because they'll be able to dominate teams defensively, especially if they had somebody like an Al Horford. But even if they didn't, they'd be so nasty on offense if they had a Kawhi Leonard and a Paul Pierce type player on top of Gordon Hayward.
I still think it's tough to play that style of offense throughout 82 games, throughout an entire game, because even the Warriors, that death lineup. There's a reason why they don't do that all the time.
Well, you can't sustain that all the time.
So I mean, if you're talking,
so are you telling me that you're going to have let's say you're going to have let's say you're retaining Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, and you're going to say Jason Tatum's job basically is to be the primary scorer for the second unit, as well as being the third option for the first unit, right? So you stagger minutes such that he plays at the beginning of the game, and then he stays in when the second unit comes in. He leads the second unit, and then he comes out of the game when you have Kyrie and Brown and Gordon in the game. So you can it's what the Rockets do with Chris Paul and with James Harden. They stagger their minutes because it's like you don't have to have the two of them on the court at the same time for the entire game. But if they are on the court together, they're going to be deadly. And it's about efficiency. And you're right, you can't sustain that necessarily over a full game. But I'd really be interested to see what a Brad Stevens led team would do when they have Kyrie in his prime, Tatum in his prime, Brown in his prime. That's the question: is do you have to shed Jaylen Brown to get an Anthony Davis type player?
Why would you get the Anthony Davis though? Is it to make up? See, that's what I'm saying. If you get Anthony Davis,
it's to basically get a big, right?
Yeah, get the big that you need because they're
not as well rounded. They really don't have enough star ball handlers and star bigs.
Right.
That's basically the problem is that Al Horford is efficient, but he's low volume.
Mm-hmm.
And you need a big who can be more physical than Al Horford, because Al Horford he can play sort of a power game, but he's more of a finesse big man.
See, I think watching this Pelicans-Warriors series is really going to give you an idea as like a Celtics fan how you need to build your team going forward, because I do think that the Pelicans, it's going to be interesting to see how they defend Anthony Davis.
Okay, I'm on 5%, so switch the phone.
Yeah, but at the same time, because how important is it to have scoring from the, because Drew Holiday is going to score.
You're saying he's going to score, right? Has Drew Holiday always been that player, or has he kind of exploded? Did he explode in that series, and then against the Warriors, it's really not going to last? And I'm not saying that Drew Holiday isn't a good player, but is Drew Holiday a max player that you can put next to AD and say because the thing that they're debating,
I think that's why they need Rondo, because I think Holiday's more of a guy that
he's a scorer.
He's a scorer, which is great because that's taking some pressure off Davis. That's the guy that you have to, you know, that at least I would say down the stretch when Boogie got hurt. That's the guy that you had to.
Because you don't think they're going to max Boogie, do you? Because he's coming off an Achilles tear, and it makes them less efficient to have two dudes who play the same position.
They were not a great defensive team when those.
That's what I'm saying. You put a power forward and a center combination together, and that's just a product of looking at the NBA through the lens of how people viewed it in the 1980s. If you put two bigs out there who do the same basic stuff, you're basically not giving them enough oxygen to breathe. What they need, honestly, DeMarcus Cousins should look about playing with Russell Westbrook, because I think that Russell Westbrook with a big could run more pick and roll actions to get him easier baskets. What he needs is easier shots. The thing about an efficient basketball team is they're looking for the best shot, and the best shot tends to be the easiest shot. So what you want to do is you want to find the dude who has the wide open shot, because it's easier to hit a shot when you're wide open than a shot than when you have somebody's hand in your face. So it's about getting easy baskets that you don't have to expend as much energy. That's why player movement is good, because when dudes are running around off the ball, they don't have to necessarily sprint all the time. Now somebody like Klay Thompson, Steph Curry, they may sprint to get off a pick so they can get clean for a shot, but for the rest of the dudes, they don't have to run full speed the whole time. They're just doing player movement. They're jogging from one position up at the high post to a position at the low post if you're like Clint Capella with the Houston Rockets. So you can do all sorts of things and kind of minimize the amount of running around you have to do. It's not 5 dudes freelancing, running around the court trying to hope that motion creates a motion. It's more like these dudes know that within this set of motions, we're going to create these shots. These shots are going to be easy because we're going to be open. Therefore, we're going to take them and we're going to make them at a higher clip. And because we're taking 3-pointers and we're hitting them at the higher rate, we can get out ahead of teams because they may match us. Like Kyrie may hit a 2-point shot under the basket, but if Steph hits a 3 in his face when they come back, they're down 1 relatively. Right. That's the difference between, and 3-point shooting, it's about volume. If you shoot volume 3-pointers, teams have just discovered if you have James Harden, if you have Steph Curry, and you can just rain in threes, you really can design a team around that, because it's the modern NBA and 3-pointers are more important than anything. But what that does is, like, so somebody like Al Horford spends a lot of time on the perimeter. I think he needs to get himself in the paint more. Like when the Rockets game, the first one in Boston Garden, who did they go to get that final basket? They went to Al Horford. Where did they go to him? They went to him on the low post. He backed down Clint Capella, right? And he made a hook shot right in his face. He just kind of like elbowed him in the face and did a little right-handed over the head shot and threw it in from like 8 feet. That's a good shot. That's better even than necessarily getting Kyrie out on the perimeter taking a 3, because that's a 3-point shot that's unnecessary. You can get a 2-pointer and win the game. So if the 2-pointer is easier to get, go get it while it's there.
I agree with that. I think it's just tough to try to tell, big men, especially in this era, to get in the paint and get physical like that. I mean, look at the Spurs with LaMarcus Aldridge. They've been trying to get this guy to, like,
bang around.
Feast in the paint ever since he's
been there.
Like, is it a thing that bigs are afraid of getting hurt? Is that their concern? Is that they're saying, if I go and bang in the paint, I'm going to play for 10 years, but if I drift out to the perimeter, I'll play 15?
I mean,
is that because if that's their concern, I'll tell them, first of all, you're going to make enough money in 10 years that if you don't have enough money at your retirement, that's your fault, nobody else's. And the second thing is, like, your 15-year career where you're Kevin Love drifting out to the perimeter, you would have been better off in the post. You would have been better off being the star, and maybe you wouldn't have won a championship, but you could have played better basketball.
I mean, I just think some of these guys just don't want to get hurt. And I mean, and the other thing too, you don't get worn out as much when you're just on the perimeter hitting jump shots. Like,
but you're also not getting like offensive rebounds, extra possession.
You're not as efficient. I just think with these guys, it's not a scheme thing. It's like I'm just not trying to do the dirty work. That's why I think Draymond Green, that's why I think he's so key for the Warriors defensively, because he does all that dirty work that helps everybody else. I think it's made Kevin Durant a better defender because Durant's been able to, fly around a little better, kind of like during times when Ibaka was there for OKC. But it's just tough to get these big men like Aldridge and I mean, usually sometimes the Karl-Anthony Towns, it's like these guys, they get a little happy when they want to be in the perimeter, and you're like, man, you could be so much more effective if you were in the paint. But I think
because you're causing fouls, right? You're doing the things that are physically. It's like you'll take a beating in the post, but the point is that you're big and you can take it. Like, the reason why Shaquille O'Neal walks funny now is because he played a long, hard NBA career. This fucker was in the paint, and you could not stop. Like there's a reason why Shaq was the most dominant player. Like because you couldn't stop. Nobody.
Shaq was so frustrated. Shaq hated the way he was treated by the refs.
But that's just because he's the biggest player. Right. You can't be giving him all the fouls like that. It's the same thing with, like, frankly, all-star players.
Right now. Ooh.
God damn.
Who was that? That was against the Bulls?
Trying to go after the wrong person, swinging like a girl on that one, whatever.
That was like, but the Palace took place in Chicago. But yeah, it's and like I said, look at Shaq. A lot of these players, they don't want to look like that, man. Like, this is the skinny G, as Michael Rappaport said. This is the skinny G era of the NBA. Like, guys, they want to be finessed. They want to shoot. They don't want to get hurt. They want to.
I understand. But
if
you're 6 feet away from the basket, you're putting it in the basket. You're 7 foot tall,
big, and you get your big ass in the paint,
down.
And basically what you're doing also,
it's like a hitter in baseball who sees a lot of pitches and they're wearing down the other team by being patient, by realizing that if they dole out visual punishment, they're going to take some, get your ass in the ice bath after the game, because you're going to get the other teams in foul trouble. Then, because there are 3 fouls, the next time they foul 2 guys on the perimeter, all of a sudden your guard is on the line shooting free throws. Because of what the big did earlier in the quarter. You know what I mean? Like, I think that there's a lot of value that is being missed and you always hear people like Shaq, people like Charles Barkley talking about the death of big men. There may be great big men in the game now because there's like Joel Embiid, Porzingis and people like this, but there's a sense in which there are easy baskets just being missed by certain teams, and I think the Celtics are honestly one of those teams. They play really good offense, but I feel like there are some times where Al Horford is out on the perimeter for no reason, and if he were in the paint, and you would just feed him like post opportunity, just like make a note of it that if we're in a quarter, we want Al Horford to be backing somebody down in the post 3 or 4 times, and the reason why is he's not even taking 3 or 4 shots necessarily. But he's getting in the paint, and he's a great passer. So while he's backing down, he can throw to an open shooter and do that sort of thing, like from the paint. That's what Tim Duncan did. Like, you can do stuff, and
the big man can have
a big impact on the game because of their size and their ability to affect things.
That's why I was saying earlier, like, the reason why you can't build around a big man is because this NBA, like, these big guys they don't want to play inside. And the other factor is I always feel like big men play
when
better
they have a guard,
when they have a guard or a perimeter player that
is able to facilitate
and get them the ball, give them easy passes, set them up. That's why Rondo is in the starting lineup for the Pelicans, because Drew Holiday is not a great facilitator. His scoring down the stretch in the series against the Blazers.
This man
This man just took over the game. But
even
then, I still think it was Rondo that was kind of the pipeline between.
Even with the Celtics.
You gotta kind of put keep the nucleus together because
Rondo
he's a field general.
But think about it. I shouldn't even say he's a smart because he's actually just a straight intelligent dude. Like
Rajon Rondo
is just an intellect that has been intimidating for a lot of coaches.
So what do you think happened in Dallas?
What do you think happened in Dallas?
Why didn't it work out?
I think he didn't want to be there, and I think he got frustrated.
He clashed with Rick Carlisle.
Well, he might have clashed with Rick Carlisle, but the thing was you'll get over clashing if you're playing well and you're winning. But I think there's certain situations where it's just life. Like sometimes things don't work out that you think you might have a better chance of doing well than what it actually turns out to be. And you just have to be like, well, that's the luck of the draw. That's regression to the mean. That's statistics. It's the way it is.
I think that Rondo not being able to score the basketball is going to hurt.
But he scored sometimes. It was like he's not going to get you.
Golden State's going to they're going to back off. They're going to dare Rondo to try to hit from the perimeter. I think that's going to be the difference in that series. The fact that they're going to force him. The Pelicans, the biggest issue with them against the Warriors to me is the fact that I don't think you're going to get enough scoring. I don't think there's enough guys that could. Consistent. I'm talking.
They're not going to be able to sustain this.
They're not going to sustain that kind of offense. The Blazers,
not necessarily.
The Blazers improve as a team defensively, but Damian Lillard and McCollum and Lillard have never been great defenders. They improved as a team defensively, but those two in particular have never been great defenders.
Why did they let LaMarcus Aldridge go?
Because Portland is not a great organization, and that's not the problem. The thing with being a small market, it's tough to get free agents, but at the same time, when you're not a well-run organization, it just makes it even, harder for players to want to continue. Like I thought about the idea of LeBron going to Portland, but then I'm like, man, he's not. I mean, okay, like LeBron, give LeBron two guys, two young guys that can give you 20 plus points a game.
LeBron wants to play point guard. He wants to. I don't want to be because I'm going to come off as being a hater of LeBron or whatever. He wants to pretend to be the point guard, and it's like if he's good enough to play point guard, let him play point guard and get another small forward out there. Why waste a dude like Mario Chalmers on the court when you could easily have somebody who can play better 3-and-D?
Eric Spoelstra, Pat Riley, but like I said, I still feel like in Mario Chalmers' role. See, when I think about the Miami Heat and how they lost those two finals, we talked about, you're a real big advocate of Rick Carlisle's scheme and how you feel like they were their zone defense and how they were able to, make LeBron a jump shooter. That was a really good defensive team, that Dallas Mavericks team. But at the same time, so was the Miami Heat. And the Miami Heat as an offensive team, they had beaten the Celtics that year, were really good on defense. They had beaten the Derrick Rose Bulls. I just don't. Because I watched that series too, and I've never seen a scheme that has been able to shut LeBron James down for an entire series. I really think there was
something strange.
I give them credit. I give them credit because I think that team was a legitimate team.
I think it's luck of the draw, right? Like you look at LeBron, and no matter how great he is, he's capable of not playing well. Like everybody's capable of having a bad day,
but that
a bad game, a bad series.
I really think that mentally he checked out.
But it's like if you get off your,
I just felt like
if you get off your game and you're kind of out of a rhythm, it can be hard to reintegrate yourself. It's a mentality thing of you're getting in your head and you're getting in your own way. But it's not like you could tell yourself just play better, because that's why they have sports psychologists with these teams, because they're trying to help these dudes realize that the world doesn't end and and thrive on what they do.
Yeah, I mean, we really have to. It's tough because you can't put numbers to these things, but the LeBron that I saw that took down the big three Celtics and the Derrick Rose Chicago Bulls, I saw.
So you thought he should have been able to beat the Mavericks and he didn't. And
I felt like that was a legitimate. Like I was rooting for Dallas coming in that city because I didn't want to see LeBron. I was terrified rooting for Dallas because I'm like, man, how are you guys going to beat this juggernaut? It felt like LeBron's Miami Heat team had not even been pushed to the edge yet, right? Like they had won. I think I don't remember if they swept the first series, but they beat the Celtics in 5 and they beat the Bulls in 5 after they lost the first game. I'm just like, man, it's like you guys like that was kind of the whole thing with they can turn it on and turn it off. It just felt like
the other thing about teams and matchups. Like there are certain teams that match up well. And you wouldn't even necessarily say that they're a better team, but because of the way they match up in terms of schemes and being able to match up individual players against each other, that they can take advantage of certain teams. Like for example, if you had a team really like the Boston Celtics, lots of wing players, lots of guards, frankly, you could imagine them playing the Warriors closely in a series, only in the sense that even though the Warriors have all-world guards and all-world perimeter players, at the end of the day, the Celtics can match up with them because they have a deep roster, they have stars in their own right, and they play a good scheme. And so that gives you a chance to win, and I think that's important.
I think, and off that, I think that's why it'll be interesting if LeBron's team doesn't get to the finals because I think a lot of fans are thirsty to see another team challenge, let's say the Warriors.
Also,
I think we just want. I think partly because some people are getting tired of LeBron being there, but at the same time, we want to see specifically the Celtics, or even a team like Toronto who's changed their philosophy to a more ball movement style. What does it look like when you match up a team with that kind of style? Maybe not with the best player on the team, but can you put
the right scheme to go up against the right team?
Because the Cavs should have got swept last year. They ended up I thought the refs gave them a bunch of calls early in that game. They got up to a big lead game 4. And they were able to hold on. But I just feel like I'm really anxious to see if a team that might not have the best player or maybe not even the star talent, can match up with a team like Golden State and give them a better chance because of the scheme. And
that's what I think. I think Houston can give them a run because their guards are on point. They have perimeter players who can hit shots, and it's about the problem with the Mike D'Antoni system is when you live and die by the 3, if you miss shots, you're not going to play well. That's just reality. And so you're inevitably going to have games where you don't shoot well. And I think for the Rockets, if they don't shoot well, are they really good enough on defense to stop the Warriors to the point that it can mitigate the fact that they're playing like that on offense?
And here's my thing. When you talk about shooting well, you're asking a lot of because Houston, in terms of star talent, they're undermanned against Golden State. So that means you're asking that either your 2 stars, Harden and Chris Paul, play out of their minds, and or you're really asking contributions from role players like Clint Capella, Trevor Ariza.
But Clint Capella is not a role player. He's a bona fide starter in this league.
You consider him a bona fide starter?
Because he's a start. Yeah, he's a starting big man. Because as a big man, you really don't have to do too much. You can play defense. You can roll to the basket. You can set picks. You can get offensive and defensive rebounds. You can set the tone on defense, being that kind of pillar in the middle of an offense where you don't really need the ball in your hands a lot. But on the other hand, if you pass it to them, they can do a handoff play to somebody else. There's a lot of things you can do with a big man. And I think Clint Capella, you got to consider him to be a legitimate starter. And I think that the Rockets, when they played the Celtics, I watched them and I was like, wow, this is, I usually watch the Celtics games and I'm like, they run deeper than the other teams. When the other teams get their benches out there, they're nowhere near as deep especially when the Celtics still had Kyrie. But, I think other teams that have a deep bench that can really roll deep and have guys come off the bench and contribute, like Cleveland should be that team. They have a lot of players like that. but for some reason they don't get the best out of them, and I don't know why that is. I can't say, but maybe we'll have to leave it there. But I want to ask one more question to kind of wrap this up.
Yeah.
Markelle Fultz versus Jason Tatum. So I would say year one, Jason Tatum clearly comes out. It looks like Danny Ainge made the right decision. Now, if year two, Markelle Fultz comes back and he looks like James Harden, and basically for the rest of their careers, it's Markelle Fultz and Jason Tatum both playing what people thought they were going to be when they were drafted. Like Markelle Fultz is going to be a 25-5 guy. He's going to be an MVP candidate. He's going to be 6'5", score at all three levels, do all these things. And then you have Jason Tatum, who's just a really polished offensive game, long, 6'9", play defense, shoot threes, do all these sorts of things. Right now, I think we're kind of a prisoner of the moment. We think that Danny Ainge is, made out like a bandit. But is there still a question of, did this, in the future, will we say the Celtics made the right decision getting Tatum, only in the sense that they already had lots of wing players. They had Gordon Hayward. They even really had Jaylen Brown already. And it's like, would they have been better off getting a secondary Batman-type scoring guard like a Markelle Fultz? And even putting him next to Kyrie. Imagine a lineup with Markelle Fultz at kind of like he played, more like he played in college, playing alongside Kyrie with Jason Tatum at the 3, and then you have Al Horford at the 4 and a big at the 5. I think that would be a monstrous lineup because you basically have a James Harden level potential guy in Markelle Fultz. You've got Kyrie, who's already at that level. You've got Jaylen Brown, who's 6'7", who can legitimately play small forward, but they have him playing shooting guard. And then you've got Al Horford, who's 6'10", who's finally playing his natural position of power forward. Just throw some dude out there, some 7-foot dude who can play defense for the Boston Celtics, get rebounds. I think that there's still an open question of, have the Celtics gotten too many good wing players for their own good that they may not be able to afford long term to be able to keep all of those wing players? And then when it comes to that, did you not leave enough money to retain your Marcus Smarts and your Terry Roziers so that eventually Kyrie is really your only good ball handler? And if they get to that situation, is there, like, if Markelle Fultz becomes what people thought he was going to be in Philadelphia and can play with Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, will history really look at Danny Ainge in that trade, that 1-for-3 trade, and say that he really made out like a bandit there? Because really, with the Celtics not getting the Lakers pick this year and only really getting the Kings or whatever pick next year, it's not really as useful to the Celtics, to be honest. So this idea that Danny Ainge traded down 2 spots and picked up a first-round pick later on, it's like, yes, he did do that, but that first-round pick is not necessarily as valuable as the difference between a great ball handler and a great wing player on a team that's already stacked on the wing. I think, maybe I was getting ahead of myself when I was trying to read the articles to see who the Celtics had picked when they had the number 1 pick, but I felt like they should have kept that pick and that they should have taken the player that they wanted at number 1. Now, I understand that one thing that Danny Ainge might have been doing is he might have known that the salary cap got reduced down below what he thought it was going to be, and he realized that the pay difference between the number 1 and the number 3 pick was such that you could fit the number 3 pick onto a roster with Gordon Hayward. You couldn't fit him onto a team with Markelle Fultz's salary. I'm not quite sure on those numbers, but that seems to be the sense that I'm getting.
I think Danny Ainge traded down because he's trying to. I think he set himself up in a position where he's able to be flexible and either build around that draft pick he gets or trade it. Because, like you were saying, I think you're in a situation. It's a good problem, but it's still a problem. Where I do think you have too many wing players.
How are they going to get all those touches shared when they're all?
But the fact is, I don't think all those wing players are fully developed yet, and that's what makes it worse because
You know what Gordon Hayward is. That's going to be a 20 to 25, point per game guy coming off an injury. So you hope he comes back 100%. But that's still kind of thing where it's like, damn, like he actually got hurt.
But if you have Gordon Hayward, you wouldn't expect Kyrie to be scoring the same amount of points per game. It would be like the big three in 08 where it was like, yo, they may be all liable to go off for 20, but they're really all averaging around 80.
But let me answer your question though. So with that being said, I think whether his points go up, whether his points drop a little bit, I don't think it hurts the team because I think it would be within them getting the points system. And every now and then you might have a breakout game just because Gordon Hayward is that caliber player. Now with Jaylen Brown, this guy's giving you I think about 14 points, or now it's up like just around 6-8 from his rookie year. The problem with Jaylen Brown's game is, I mean, you like the fact that he can score, you like his length, you like his size, his ability to play defense.
I wish you were.
But you don't like the fact that he's not a beat, but he's not exactly. So that's where it's like, okay.
How are you going to get ripped going?
Are you going to fix this flaw? It's your second year. Will you fix this in year 3 or 4?
Really, year 5 or 6 when they reward you with a new contract, right?
Or is it a situation? And that's the thing. When you think about that, you have to first decide in your mind: are we willing to take this chance? Are you worth taking that chance on? If you are, then we have to look about moving Tatum, because I don't think you can keep all three. You really have to swallow your pride to trade a guy that just signed a max contract. If you trade Gordon Hayward, you were literally saying, listen, I know we made big noise about getting you.
That'd be savage. Absolutely savage.
You know what? You're a little too much right now.
So you think it's possible the Celtics could trade Gordon Hayward?
I think that's literally something that
you think about doing that if you saw enough from Brown.
You do, but you really have to be willing to swallow your pride to say, you know what? I think Jason Tatum turned out to be, good enough. Right? We can consider taking this guy. He might not score 20 next year. He might give us 17, maybe 19. But I think this guy can be just as good, if not better, than you in a couple of years. And there's a accomplishment in this couple of years. Jaylen Brown. If I think that this guy can be a good primary ball handler, I'm going to keep that invested because he's younger than you. He's not coming off an injury. And I think he has more potential to be. I think he has potential to be a better slasher than you. I think like his Jaylen Brown's skill set. I think Jaylen Brown has a higher ceiling than Gordon Hayward. And I think the financial. I think the ceiling is in him because of his athleticism. I think that's my hot take. I think the ceiling is there. I'm not saying he'll reach that point, but I think that's something you have to think about. And one of those guys has to go. But if one of those guys goes, you should really consider getting a big man like Anthony Davis, maybe bringing a DeMarcus Cousins in. I think I say keep Kyrie. I think
even like a Kristaps Porzingis or even like Karl Anthony Towns, I think would be a better investment.
Yeah, because I don't think Boogie can play defense to save his damn life. And maybe it was the system. But Boogie's just like, come on, man, like it. I think Boogie in Boston,
Boogie Cousins.
Boston,
I was in my NBA 2K my player. I was doing a point guard thing on the Kings, and this dude was the center. And playing point guard with a center like that makes it really easy. So you can just dump it off to him and pay. And then they trade fucking Kawhi Leonard for this dude, and it makes it so much harder.
So I think. Kyrie coming off the injury makes it difficult too. You think he's going to be all right?
He'll be fine.
For me, it remains to be seen. Assuming Kyrie comes back healthy, I think
you give him.
I think you have to. The thing is, you don't want. The other reason you don't want one of these wings coming off the bench because I think they're too talented of an asset to have off the bench. If you trade one of them and you get value, you get a legitimate, all-star player. Because I think you do need some volume scoring at the 4 or 5 position. I think you need more scoring there. And I think he needs himself in a position where he can do either or. I would be shocked if he. I really would be shocked if he traded Hayward. I think you need to keep Kyrie, and I think one of those players has to go. I think what you're looking at in terms of building is Golden State, Houston. I think you're looking at those two teams because I think with Steph, it's going to be interesting to see if Golden State stays healthy for the rest of these playoffs, and whether they do end up being Houston. Because I think with Houston, the fact that Houston has home court advantage,
I think could make the difference in that series because of home court advantage. You have to beat a team 4 times. That's 4 games where my role players can give me above average games. So I think the odds are in your favor from that perspective because you have scores that can do it for the Celtics. So you have to look at it like this. I need scoring from the bigs, but at the same time, you have to move one of the wings. I think the second and what's the second question you asked me between Terry Rozier and Smart? If I had to keep one, I'm keeping Terry because
like if you can afford to keep one of those two and you can keep one of Tatum or Brown and you can retain the basic structure of Gordon Hayward, Kyrie, maybe even Al Horford.
And that's the thing. If I have to move out, I'll move out too because I know what the numbers say about what Al brings to the team in terms of like Al is our power forward, but he has point guard traditional point guard responsibilities in this team. Just the way he's able to get the best out of everybody. But here's the thing: the way this team is constructed. If Gordon Hayward was, it's tough. I mean, do I think Gordon Hayward with Al Horford as the 4-5 whatever will be able to beat the Warriors? Honestly, I don't think so. I think you need more power at that position. I think you can find somebody. I think you can find somebody to fill that role. I don't think you keep Al Horford's point guard as skills. I don't think you keep that. I don't think you keep that.
You don't think it's worth that much?
I don't think it's not going to be Golden State, and I don't. It might have been able to beat Houston with Gordon Hayward, but because I think Golden State is going to the finals. I don't think that Al Horford doing that. I don't think his value means enough in terms of kind of like how you feel how LeBron's value doesn't mean as much. It doesn't. If it's not.
I think LeBron is so valuable, but he could be more if he did
less. Right,
exactly.
I just think that with Al, in this case with the Celtics, his value is there, but it doesn't elevate. It elevates you to a level, but not a level where I think you can beat the Warriors.
He's like a third option on a great team.
Exactly, and that's what I'm saying with Hayward. If you kept the Browns and the Tatums, I think you could beat Houston. I think you could beat Houston, but not Golden State because Golden State they just have the talent and they have a system just as good as yours. Mm-hmm. So I think that you do need. I do think you need that big guy that can give you some points. And if you lose Al Horford, I don't know who would take that responsibility. I don't know if it would end up being Kyrie. I think they might struggle, but at the same time, give yourself an opportunity to find someone to fill that role. But you don't want it to be a bench player either because I think that's the issue with the Celtics and losing Marcus Smart is the fact that you feel like you have a guy that can facilitate to an extent, but the problem is you don't want that from a guy off the bench. The Warriors have Draymond Green, when you really think about it, it's kind of like that guy. He's the one giving you the 11, the 10 points.
But they even have like Sean Livingston
coming off the bench, but they have a guy in the starting lineup who sort of handles the traditional point guard duties.
I feel like they really have two dudes who play like that, like Steph Curry and Draymond Green are the primary passers. Mm-hmm. KD will get some passes, and for Klay Thompson, his job isn't even pass. His job is to shoot the ball when he's open, and that's what he does real well. And then KD's job is obviously scoring. Then they have one dude else in the court whose job is to fill in the rest of the details, the non-scoring stuff, the toughness stuff that you really need to round out a team. You have somebody like JaVale McGee, put him in. He's athletic. He'll play that big spot, and he'll fill that big role in the lineup that every team needs, that toughness, that interior, Kendrick Perkins defense, that sort of thing.
See, Buddy was talking, I forgot what the player's name was, but there was a big, I don't know if he plays for Arizona, but there's a big man coming up in this year.
Mozambo or no, DeAndre Ayton.
I think so, yeah. And, because we always talk about the Celtics needing to have a big man. And I'm just like, listen, I'm not relying on a rookie center to win me a title. Like, if you get an Anthony Davis here, you have to give up Jaylen Brown, or you have to give up Tatum or Hayward, then do it. If you got to give up one of those guys and some draft picks, maybe. I think if you bring AD here, the chance that you keep Al Horford, because Al Horford's contract is a problem. I think you got to be willing to, like I said, you got to be willing to give up everybody but Kyrie
unless you want to bring Kawhi, which I don't want to do because
that's some foolish shit. The dude who wrote on ESPN that the Celtics should trade Kyrie for Kawhi Leonard what the fuck are you talking about?
When you get a point, I still think the point guard is 1A, 1B in terms of most important position. So if you get that point guard and he's not a liability on defense, he can hit from three, you keep that and you find a way to get the pieces around that. So that's why I don't want to move Kyrie, assuming he comes back healthy. Kawhi, I don't think Kawhi is a great passer. He's not a great.
Look at this offense for the King and for the Cleveland Cavaliers right now. So they just waited for like 5 seconds when they got across court to get LeBron James the ball, and oh my God, what the fuck is going on?
Like they come across half court with somebody else.
Oh yeah, I forgot your second question. Markelle Fultz and Jason Tatum. So with Markelle Fultz. There were also talks about him being the type of point guard to be an off-the-ball kind of point guard, a guy that doesn't need to be the primary ball handler. I think that's great because Ben Simmons has to have the ball in his hands to be effective. Ben Simmons needs to be. He's playing point guard right now. I think they have Saric and Covington as 3 and 4. So Markelle Fultz being a sort of Bradley Beal type of 2-1 is perfect for their scheme. I think that if you switched it and Jason Tatum goes to Philadelphia and Fultz comes to Boston, Fultz is 6'4".
6'4".
I haven't seen enough of him on defense, but I'm not crazy. I don't like it when my guards are undersized when they can be exposed.
But he's 6'4", 6'5", so he's shooting guard size, and that's the thing. He's about James Harden size.
Let me look. What's Klay Thompson like?
Klay Thompson's like 6'7", my dude. He's a tall ass motherfucker. He's strong. He's fast. He's good at defense. That's why he's the primary perimeter defender.
Yeah, I like, and I think. Let me see.
Kobe Bryant's like 6'4", 6'5".
Like in the 90s NBA, two guards were kind of more like that lower 6, like that 6'5".
He's got like Michael Jordan's 6'6", and everybody kind of bounces. Or you're either 6'7", 6'5", 6'4". Even Dwayne Wade's 6'4", one of the greatest shooting guards of all time. It's just about whether you can score at that position.
Yeah, Dwayne, like I said, Dwayne was a really good defender too. I just
look at the ball back in LeBron's hands, down by 10 in the first quarter. I know.
I just like the idea of a 2-guard. I like the idea of a 2-guard being able to be a pest and being able to use his length as an advantage as well. So in the end, I think it only hurts the Celtics in the end if they end up because if you got Fultz instead of Tatum, then you wouldn't have a problem in terms of like wing players because you have Gordon Hayward and then you have Jaylen Brown.
Exactly, it'd be a balanced team.
But then Jaylen Brown, but then it's still a situation where Fultz, you have to put him at guard. If he's not the one, he's the 2.
But he could be the 2 playing off the ball while Kyrie is your primary.
No, that's fine. But then who's the foot? So then you have Hayward. If you have Hayward.
Hayward at the 3, or you really could do like
because in that situation, I think that it's still similar because
Brown would be because unless you're basically willing to say we're willing to put Gordon Hayward at the 4, seeing as he is 6'8", he's probably not big enough to play with real power forwards, but he's big enough to be that kind of stretch 4, where he's really just a wing player, and as long as you have a big enough dude playing center, that you can get away with that. But I mean, if
they
couldn't
do it for a long stretch.
That's why. But I think if they had Markelle Fultz, they'd be so dangerous on offense.
Well, we got to see Markelle Fultz. We got to see Markelle Fultz play more.
We saw him in college. Like he looked like a James Harden. Like you watched him, and he had that sort of the style where Russell Westbrook powers by people and he bursts by them. This dude, Markelle Fultz, was just dancing around people like Harden. Harden doesn't run circles around people. He out dribbles them, and then he uses his size, and he's surprisingly fast for his size. But it's the same thing where guys who are smooth at like that 6'5" size, who can really get their shot off at all 3 levels, like those are the guys who can really pour in volume scoring.
And when this motherfucker pulls up at the 3-point line, you have to put a hand in his face, because otherwise he'll knock a shot down right in your face. And then once you put your hand up, he'll dance right by you, and he's in mid-range. You can take a shot there, or he can drive to the basket and make a shot. And I think that sort of offense creation is going to be the interesting thing, where somebody like Mark Helfeld, maybe the Celtics saw his shoulder injury. Maybe they saw, they were like, this man has shoulder imbalance. He hasn't been working.
I heard he wasn't even really hurt. I heard literally like he tried to change his jump shot, and then.
But they said that what it seems to happen, because the only reason they would say muscle imbalance would seem to imply that what happened was he spent all the time after his college career was done basically trying to physically prepare himself for the pros, and this is speculation too, but that he hurt himself working out, that he created like an imbalance on, you know, one of his shoulders was stronger than the other one. He wasn't, you know, properly balancing that out, you know, his arms or whatever it happened to be, that caused like a muscle imbalance. And then when this motherfucker gets back on the basketball court for more time, it's like, yo, he may be big because he thought that he was going to have to put on more mass to deal with the NBA. But at the same, it's kind of like Bryce Harper when this dude got really ripped and then he didn't play as well. And then he comes back not as ripped and he plays much better. It's like sometimes you can do too much for yourself physically,
Right.
trying to make yourself big and strong for that. And then you end up doing too much and it leads to you getting hurt. And then he's in the position where now I've got a shoulder problem. Now I can't practice my jump shot like everybody else who would be in my position. Now I have to find a new way to shoot jump shots that's butt fuck ugly. And it's like, yo, all you have to do is be patient, because this man could be out for the entire year. But if he comes back for year 2